Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 14th chapter, text number 51. Okay. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim Yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Okay, reading from Canto number 3, chapter 14, text 51. Maitreyo vacha Shrutva Bhagavatam Pautram Amodata Ditirbhrisham Putrayoscha Vadham Krishnad Vidivasin Mahamanaha. Maitreyo vacha Shrutva Bhagavatam Pautram Amodata Ditirbhrisham Putrayoscha Vadham Krishnad Viditvasin Mahamanaha. Maitreyo vacha Shrutva Bhagavatam Pautram Amodata Ditirbhrisham Putrayoscha Vadham Krishnat Viditvasin Mahamanaha. Word to word. Maitreyo vacha. The sage Maitreya said, Shrutva, by hearing, Bhagavatam, to be the great devotee of the Lord, Pautram, grandson, Amodata, took pleasure, Ditihi, Diti, Bhrisham, very greatly, Putrayoho, of 2 sons, Cha, also, Vadham, the killing, Krishnat, by Krishna, Viditva, knowing this, Asit, became, Mahamanaha, highly pleased in mind. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The sage Maitreya said, hearing that her grandson would be a great devotee and that her sons would be killed by Krishna, Diti was highly pleased in mind. Purport. Diti was very aggrieved to learn that because of her untimely pregnancy, her sons would be demons and would fight with the Lord. But when she heard that her grandson would be a great devotee and that her 2 sons would be killed by the Lord, she was very satisfied. As the wife of a great sage and the daughter of a great Prajapati, Daksha, she knew that being killed by the personality of Godhead is a great fortune. Since the Lord is absolute, his acts of violence and non-violence are both on the absolute platform. There is no difference in such acts of the Lord. Mundane violence and non-violence have nothing to do with the Lord's acts. A demon killed by him attains the same result as one who attains liberation after many, many births of penance and austerity. The word Bhrisham is significant herein because it indicates that Diti was pleased beyond her expectations. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd canto, 14th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Pregnancy of Diti in the Evening. I'll read the translation one more time. The sage Maitreya said, hearing that her grandson would be a great devotee and that her sons would be killed by Krishna, Diti was highly pleased in mind. Okay, Hare Krishna. So all along for the past many, many weeks, we have heard about Diti and Kashyapa, how she got pregnant and how, he tried to convince her one way and how she wasn't. And finally, after that, how he told her that, you know what, you will have two sons. They will be very powerful, but they'll be a big nuisance to this world. So that made her very sad and she regretted it. And her remorse was so sincere. Later, then Kashyapa tells her, you'll also have a transcendently powerful, a pure devotee, a Mahabhagavata, a devotee of the Lord. So here we are at the end of the chapter, and we hear that ultimately, after what she hears from her husband, she was very, very pleased in mind. And so I pulled out a few different points to discuss from this particular translation and purport. One was that regret or remorse. Uh, I have heard that, when devotees, so there's Pancha Samskara, initiation, Vaishnava initiation. There is a verse, Tapa, Pundra, Nama, Mantra, Yaga, and all of that. So those are the 5 samskaras that are performed. And I think it is Bhakti Vinod Thakur who says that Sri Vaishnavas, for them also, they have those Pancha Samskaras when they take their initiation. Tapa is where they are branded with hot iron, the symbols of Vishnu on their arms. Then, there is the Pundra, Urdhva Pundra. They wear tilak, that is vertical, signifying, that we are devotees of Vishnu. Then Nama, you get the holy names of the Lord. Then you get mantra from the spiritual master. And finally, the yaga is, we understand that is deity worship or Shalagram worship. So while externally Sri Vaishnava initiation and Gaudiya initiation are similar, what I've heard in a lecture is that tapa, austerity, is not branding of symbols of Vishnu on our arms, in our case, in Gaudiya Siddhanta, but it is this regret for our material attachments, sincere regret. And she is expressing that over here, and how that regret is also very, very powerful. So, contrasting this is, again, drawing back to my childhood and my upbringing. We may undergo sufferings because we undergo sufferings because of our past activities, our desires, and so many other factors. It's complicated, right? And when we undergo suffering, different people have different ways of dealing with it. One way that I have seen in my family deal with is, astrologer. When something is not going right, you'll go to the astrologer. They may suggest what is known as prayaschitta. They'll say, oh, you know what, break 108 coconuts or do pradakshinam or chant this mantra for 21 days, something like that. It's a prayaschitta. So I wanted to link this with another pastime, and that is the pastime of Daksha Prajapati. Just so I'm a little wound up in my head at the moment. So let me unwind that. So we started off with Diti's sincere regret. Then I said how that is purifying. There is a caveat though, and that caveat is what I want to explain now. And so this is a conversation between Parikshit and Sukadev Goswami, where after the hellish planets are described, Parikshit says, but you know what? And then, he feels sorry for it. And, this topic of prayaschitta comes and he says, this is not effective. We see that people may have prayaschitta, it may purify them of their acts, that the results of that act at that moment, or the results of their past acts at that moment, but it does not remove the seed. That desire to enjoy separately from Krishna is not removed. And as an example of that, we can see Daksha Prajapati. He um, vilified Lord Shiva. The whole pastime of Dakshayani happened. His head was replaced with a goat. And yet when he came back again as Daksha, he had the same issue, the way he spoke with Narada Muni. So prayaschitta on its own is insufficient. It can remove, the reactions of that karma at that stage in our life. But a stronger antidote is, where Krishna says, Jnana Deepena Bhashvata, Aham Ajnana Jam Tamaha. So that Ajnana, what comes out of this Ajnana Ja, that is which is born out of ignorance. How is that removed? It is when the Supreme Lord, He Himself brings that light of knowledge, the torch of knowledge in our hearts. Krishna personally takes away. And in our daily prayers also, right, we talk about Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So that role is performed by our spiritual master of removing this ignorance. So that is point number one that I want to talk about is the role of regret and how it is brought to its full fruition by a guru, by a bona fide guru, who is in turn a representative of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, it remains incomplete. But in Diti's case, we can see right away after that purport that she had that training because she was the, Kashyapa's wife, Daksha's daughter. So her birth was very extraordinary, and therefore she had the training. And because of that training, here she was in this current position. So this is where I want to segue into the next point, and that is, without this training, what happens is we are swayed by how our mind takes us this way or that way. When things go well, we are happy. When things go bad, we are unhappy. When we receive something, we're grateful. When we don't receive something, we become bitter. When something is taken away, we may be unhappy. When something is given to us, then we are jubilant. So this is the situation of the mind that keeps going in here and there. But we saw from previous point how when that ajnana, ignorance is removed, the ignorance is the root cause of ignorance. Root cause of suffering is ignorance. And what is that ignorance? Ignoring Krishna. When that is removed, we don't sway. Because then what happens is we see this entire picture. We see the big picture of things. Here we can see that Diti understands the so-called calamity that is going to come in front of her, which is her two sons going to be killed. And she understands. So, again from Bhagavad Gita, we see Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evam Yo Vetti Tatvataha Tyaktva Deham Punarjanma Naiti Mameti Swarjana. So people who understand Krishna's birth and pastimes, for them, there is no other birth. They are directly liberated. And that is the platform that Diti is on. She is understanding this as a pastime of the Lord. She is able to fully accept it. And that is to her credit. That is to her eternal credit. And that cannot be taken away. She completely understands. And her happiness that she is feeling is a transcendental mode of happiness. It is not in the modes of nature at all. So that is one thing. Seeing the big picture is seeing the Lord's hand in everything in our life. And what is the contrast? The contrast is having this narrow vision. And again, to show that pastime, I wanted to take us back to Mahabharata, Shantanu's, how when Ganga drowned one baby after another, he was distraught. He was besides himself every single time. and yet he was bound because of the promise he made to her. And when she explains the backstory behind it, then he was somewhat pacified. So this, when we see a certain thing happening in our life, it is because of our narrow vision. We don't have a big picture. When we have a big picture, then things settle down for us. Uh, Again, so this is like on these two levels, right? At a transcendental level, we see, for example, in pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, uh, Shivananda Sen, who was, like the tour guide, the tour operator, the financier, and the everything of the great Rath Yatra tour that would happen from Navadvip. He would take hundreds and thousands of devotees from Navadvip to Puri for the Rath Yatra. He would make arrangements. One time it happened that uh, I think there were some delays, because of which Lord Nityananda became angry and he kicked Shivananda Sen. And but Shivananda Sen was not disturbed. Externally speaking, it seemed like something wrong had happened to him. In fact, I think if I remember the past time, Lord Nityananda also said one of your son would die or something like that. And the wife was beside herself, Shivananda Sen's wife. Then he scolds her. He says, "You don't understand. This is a blessing of Lord Nityananda that I have received." And of course, Lord Nityananda is an Avadhuta. It is hard to understand this pastime. But the fact to take away from this is that Shivananda Sen was not the least bothered. He was not bothered at all. In fact, he saw the transcendental blessing in that situation. Another example from Lord Chaitanya's pastime, when Haridas Thakur is taken to the prison by the Nawab, he was put in the prison bars for not giving up chanting the holy name. The other prisoners were happy. They were like, "Oh, a sadhu has entered our prison house. Maybe we can get a blessing from him." And what does Haridas Thakur say? He says, "May you remain in the same position." And then they again become distraught. They're saying, "What are you saying, oh sadhu, oh Haridas? You want us to be in this prison house all the time?" And he says, "No, this attitude of you welcoming a sadhu, this attitude of you being favorable to a Vaishnava, may you be in that position. Don't worry about this material prison. You're going to get out of it in just a matter of few days. But may you remain protected." So that is the real big picture. So again, wrapping up our second point, Diti was able to see the big picture, and therefore, she was willing to take this so-called misfortune in her life. Like Lord Brahma, again, he says, right, in 10th canto, 14th chapter, he says, "My Lord, one who earnestly awaits for you to bestow your costless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds, and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for a liberation, for it has become his rightful claim." So that is our second point of seeing this big picture and seeing any of those sufferings and taking them in the right attitude, that we have a limited vision, but there is a bigger picture to this. And finally, to this point where Prabhupada talks about non-violence and violence. Again, this is our conditioning, right? Like where we think violence is not good, non-violence is good. So that is our own conditioning. And yes, it has its place in our current material context. I'm not going to say, "Oh, wars are good." That's not the point. The point is that what is the outcome? Why do we say violence is bad? When women and children, they are walking into Gaza Strip, they have nothing of their own. That's the result of a material war, right? What is the outcome of non-violence? It may not be so good in the mundane sense. So we have to shifting that focus from our material world to our ultimate destination, that our ultimate outcome, that is where this non-difference comes in. from the outside violence, a body is getting killed, or non-violence, somebody is not getting harmed, but their outcomes can be something different. In this case, when the Supreme Lord kills, or when he dances on the hoods of Kaliya, or when he might take, the Chandan from Kubja, any of those acts, or when he accepts the lotus flower from Gajendra, the outcome of all of that is auspicious. And so that is leading to my final point about liberation. And in this case, we understand, Jaya Vijaya, they ultimately came as Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, then Ravana and Kumbhakarna, then Shishupal and Dantavakra. Ultimately, when they were killed by Krishna as Shishupal and Dantavakra, that is when they went back to Godhead. And so, I wanted to read this purport. This is my final point this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela. This is from the purport to 5.36. So, in Laghu Bhagavatamrita by Rupa Goswami, actually, let me say this. This verse is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of Rupa Goswami, who further discusses the same topic in Laghu Bhagavatamrita. There he refers to Vishnu Purana. So this is the background, right? So what is being said in Vishnu Purana? Maitreya Muni asked Parashara, in regard to Jaya and Vijaya, how it was that Hiranyakashipu next became Ravana and enjoyed more material happiness than demigods but did not attain salvation. Although when he became Shishupal and quarreled with Krishna and was killed, he attained salvation and merged into the body of Krishna. So here is the answer. Parashara replied that Hiranyakashipu failed to recognize Lord Narasimhadev as Lord Vishnu. He thought Narasimhadev was some living entity. And so skipping forward, nevertheless, because Hiranyakashipu was killed by hands of Narasimhadeva, in his next life he became Ravana and had proprietorship of unlimited opulence. Again, was Ravana able to accept Rama? No, he did not accept Rama as personality of Godhead. Even though he was killed by Rama, he did not attain Sayujya, and he was too much attracted to Janaki, the wife of Rama. And because of that attraction, he was able to see Rama. But instead of accepting Rama as an incarnation, Ravana thought of him as an ordinary living entity. But again, because he was killed by the Lord, he got privilege of taking birth as Shishupal. Then finally, the final point that's made here is that Shishupal was envious of Krishna, frequently uttered the names of Krishna, thought of his beautiful features. Thus, by chanting Krishna's names and constantly thinking of him, even unfavorably, he was cleansed of the contamination of his sinful activities. So when Shishupal was killed by Sudarshana Chakra, his constant remembrance of Krishna dissolved the reactions of his vices, and he attained salvation by becoming one with the body of the Lord. So to wrap up my discussion for today, we first talked about remorse of Diti and how that was sincere, and how that sincere regret combined with receiving knowledge from, Bhagavatam, from Srila Prabhupada, from our gurus, ultimately from Lord Krishna, that reinstates in our position. And when we are reinstated in our position, that is where we can see the big picture. And when we see the big picture, we are not swayed by happiness or distress. We can see the Lord's hand in it. And as Brahma says that, when, those things, the ripples may come in the ocean, in the lake, in the small lake of our lives. But when we see that ripple is coming from the other shore, perhaps that which has Krishna's hand, and when it is reaching this shore of our body, when we see that connect, that alone is our ticket to go to the other side of that shore. And finally, this difference and non-difference between violence and non-violence, and liberation, that's been spoken of in the purport. So I want to pause here. If you all have anything to share, I'd love to hear from you.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you so much. Yeah, I was able to join, so my other call got cancelled. I have 8
Oh,
o'clock.
okay,
Yeah,
so you
thank you
come
so much.
again. Okay,
Yeah.
Prabhu.
No, no, seeing the big picture, Mataji, I think that is, I mean, always big picture is good. I mean, if we have the at least the understanding, the problem is that in the in at that moment it's a big challenge, right? So every time everything is orchestrated by the Lord, but then when we don't see that, it is going to be always a challenge.
Yeah,
So I mean, whatever things I was just reflecting from my side. I mean, whatever things happened. I mean, at that moment, many things looks very bad, right?
yeah,
But then when we wait and patient, and then of course they're all going to be turned out to be. I mean, good from the perspective of overall sense, right? So sometimes they may not look good from our view. So yes, because I was just thinking about that.
yeah,
But yeah, at that moment, even the past tense that you mentioned, it's very hard. It's not going to be easy unless somebody is very, very transcendentally situated, right? I mean, losing a son, Sivanand Sen, or
yeah.
I mean, Srivas Pandit, or the, right, those are the kind of very difficult moments, right? So, but they're able to see those.
I
Yes.
think, it was Amrita Kelly Mataji's class. She was talking about expanded intelligence and expanded influence. I think those two things. That's what came to my mind when you were talking. They have this expanded intelligence, not mundane intelligence.
Mm.
Yeah. Divine blessings. And therefore, there is auspiciousness in their lives.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. So maybe we can end the call here. वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।